This is the word of Christ. I came from the Father and have come into the world, and now I am leaving the world and going to the Father. His disciples said, now you are speaking plainly and not using figurative speech. Now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God. Jesus answered them, Do you now believe? Behold, the hour is coming, indeed it has come, when you will be scattered, each to his own home, and will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world.
For 15 years, Jim Fix, I don't know if you know that name, he ran 82 miles a week. He was a runner. He had been an out-of-shape man, smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day, was 80 pounds heavier than when he got on a health kick. And so he had been running for 15 years, lost all this weight, and but at the age of 52, he died of a massive heart attack while he was running. His wife later speculated that he had no idea that he suffered from coronary artery disease because he never went for checkups. He had decided that he was healthy because he was running so much. The doctor speculated that perhaps because of all the running, he didn't even feel the pain in his heart. But he was self-deceived. The reality of it was he did have coronary artery disease and he died. In our passage, in this whole section, in fact, in all of the Gospels, the disciples are self-deceived. They pretend to know that they know something. They pretend that they know something. In verse 29, they say, now you're speaking plainly and not using figurative speech. Now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God. Well, at least they got that right, that he came from God. At least they know where he has come from, but they missed the big picture, didn't they? They had no idea what Jesus was about to do in a few short hours. Not in their wildest imaginations do they think that Jesus is going to lay down his life and be crucified. They are still counting on an earthly reign of Christ. And they were self-deceived. I wonder, is our culture self-deceived? I don't know if you saw this news story a couple months back about Emil Ratelband in Holland, who came to the court and petitioned that his birthday be changed so that he would be 20 years younger. He actually went to the courts to get this changed. He's a motivational speaker, and he wanted the day of his birth to match how he felt mentally and how he felt physically. I guess he was in shape and he felt 20 years younger, so he wanted to change the birthday. This is what he said: I feel much younger than my age. I am a young god. I can have all the girls I want, but not after I tell them that I'm 69. I feel young, I'm in great shape, and I want this to be legally recognized because I feel abused, aggrieved, and discriminated against because of my age. I am my identity. Well, the courts told him no, because they would have to change a whole host of things and lose 20 years of history in the process, and it would cause all kinds of other problems. So they denied his request, but it's absurd, and we're seeing all kinds of absurdities come about. People self-deceived about who they are, saying they can be anything they want to be if they just say it. There's self-deception going on all over the place in our culture. What about us? Are we self-deceived? After all, we're in the church. We're not in the self-deception business, right? We look at those out there, that they're self-deceived. Well, the truth is no one likes to be wrong about anything. So we pontificate. We're good at pontificating about things we think we know about, even if we don't really know about it. All you got to do is look at the pundits on TV, and they all argue vociferously for their viewpoint, and you go, you got to be kidding me. That sounds absurd. Well, it's everywhere, right? So it's probably in here too. I was thinking, as I often do, about dieting. I have actually said to people, now here you go. I have actually said to people that I don't know why I'm so heavy because I don't eat that much. I've actually said that to people, okay? So some of you know, many of you don't know, but I'll announce it right now. I'm going to Overeaters Anonymous. That's true. And the first thing you do when you get in there, when you say anything, you say, "Hi, I'm Mark, and I'm a compulsive overeater." If there's one thing I've learned in there, it's that that's the real truth about me. That's the real truth. We're so good at hiding it and making excuses. You might say, why are you sharing such important and deep things about yourself, Pastor Mark? Because every one of you is self-deceived about something also. Things you got going on in your life, and you don't want to believe the truth about it. So you float around on the outside of it, make excuses, whatever. Yes, we're all self-deceived. And you know what? We're self-deceived about Christianity too. I really believe that. You might ask, how are we self-deceived about Christianity? See, I don't think it's that different from the disciples. I think we have a paradigm about Christianity. This is the way it's supposed to work. This is the way it's supposed to be. And so we continue in the paradigm no matter what anybody else says, no matter what truth might be presented to us. And I think that we are deceived, self-deceived about what it means to be a disciple and what it means to count the cost of discipleship. The disciples are acting like they know what Jesus is all about. Oh, now we know you've come from the Father. Oh, yes, now we know you're not speaking in riddles anymore. You're not speaking, you're not hiding what you're saying. We get everything you're saying. Oh, now we get it, Jesus. And what's funny is, or what's interesting, is that Jesus doesn't correct them. He just says this. Oh, do you now believe? Behold, the hour is coming, indeed it has come, when you will be scattered, each to his own home, and will leave me alone. It must have been what? There he is in riddles again. We can't get this. But they would be painfully aware how self-deceived they were within a few short hours. Their dreams of an earthly kingdom would go up in smoke. Most of them would scatter like cockroaches. They were in the Garden of Gethsemane at the end when the soldiers came to get Jesus. And one of the great things about having been to Israel, I can picture where they are. There's Jerusalem up here. I'll turn this way. Jerusalem up here, and the Mount of Olives over here, and between them is the Kidron Valley. And the Garden of Gethsemane is on the bottom part of the Mount of Olives. Most of them probably ran up the Mount of Olives when the soldiers came and went over to Bethany, which was on the other side of the Mount of Olives. Peter, of course, followed the gang down into the Kidron Valley and up the hill up the mountain to Jerusalem. Peter wanted to watch from a distance, but it was there that he would actually deny Jesus with curses. Just hours after he had boasted that he would never deny him. Just hours after he had claimed that he knew who Jesus was. I don't think that's very far from what we would be, or we could be, in a moment of crisis, in a moment of panic. See, paralyzing fear is a terrible thing, and it really is rooted in self-deception. And self-deception leads to self-protection. Peter was going to protect himself at all cost. See, paralyzing fear is rooted in self-deception because it tells you that you're alone in the world, that no one has your back, that you will fall, that you will be destroyed, this is the end of you. That's what paralyzing fear does. This is the end. There is no hope for you whatsoever. And it's complete and total self-deception for those who know Jesus. So Jesus makes this prediction, and it's exactly what happened. They were scattered, and they denied him. Now, little parentheses. You'll notice the part of the prediction involves himself. He says, "You will leave me alone." And yet Jesus was resolute. He was confident. He knew what he was going to do. He was not going to be dissuaded from his mission. How could he do that? Because he tells them, "Yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me." The Father accompanied him all the way through the trial, all the way through Pilate and Herod, all the way through those things. And then the Father was with him as he walked his cross out to the hill of Golgotha. He was there when he got the nails hammered in. He was there, but when he got on the cross, that's where the Father made him experience hell for our sakes. But the Father was with him even in the scattering. So when he was left alone, he knew that his Father was there. But this was all part of the plan. And he knew that Jesus was not self-deceived. He knew exactly what he was about. I think this idea of the presence of God in our lives is something we are self-deceived about. Do you remember when Jesus was about to ascend to the Father and he gave them the Great Commission that they needed to go into all the world and preach the gospel and make disciples? The very last phrase he does is, "And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." I am with you always. This is his promise for those who call on his name. And many of us struggle to believe that this is actually true. That no matter the hardship, Jesus is with us. But I want to tell us, for those who struggle believing that, the promise isn't just that he will be with us. It's way bigger than that. See, what good is it that he's going to be with us? Does he have power? That's what we want to know. Does he really have the power to do what he says he's going to do in our life? Let's look at what he says. Verse 33, "In the world you have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world." Some preach that when Jesus says that he will overcome the world, it means that your blessing is about to start, that you are just about to come into a season of life where your problems will be taken care of. You'll be in a new season. You'll go to the next level, and everything will work out in your circumstances around you. This is a very prominent way of preaching in our country and around the world today. But what it lacks is the very first part of the verse. "In the world you will have tribulation." That's promised too. In the world you will have tribulation. It's going to come, and it's going to keep coming, and it's going to keep happening. There will be tribulation. There will be hardship. There will be difficulty. There will be moments where we have no idea what to do. There will be moments when we feel alone. We don't know where we are. These moments will come continually. There will be moments when people will ostracize us for our faith. These are going to come. But he says, take heart. I've overcome the world. I think we have a hard time understanding this idea of tribulation. Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard, the great Danish philosopher, understood this. He said this: I went into church and sat on the velvet pew. I watched as the sun came shining through the stained glass windows. The minister, dressed in a velvet robe, opened the golden gilded Bible, marked it with a silk bookmark, and said, "If any man will be my disciple," said Jesus, "let him deny himself, take up his cross, sell what he has, give it to the poor, and follow me." They don't seem to go together, do they? We're addicted to stuff. We're addicted to comfort. What would it look like for Jesus to be more important than our spouse? What would it look like for Jesus to be more important than our children? What would it look like for Jesus to be more important than our jobs? What would it look like for Jesus to be more important than our houses or our cars or our hobbies or our sports or the freedom we enjoy? What would it look for Jesus to be more important than everything in our lives? It'd be like death, because we're inundated with those things. And so not only would it be a death to love Jesus more than those things, but as we begin to love Jesus in greater and greater ways, it makes us stand for him, and we are living in a society that's more and more against what Jesus really taught. And so tribulation will come. Tribulation will come. There's a cost to discipleship. Martin Luther said, a religion that gives nothing, costs nothing, and suffers nothing is worth nothing. We're living in a cheap grace society where you can have all of your comforts, you can enjoy all the perks of affluence. You can live in a cocoon, isolated from the world, isolated from poverty, isolated from racism, ignoring injustice. And you can also, at the very same time that you're living in the cocoon, also be a good Christian in good standing with the church and have everyone think you're a wonderful Christian. You can do both end in our society today. In his book, The Cost of Discipleship, Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, cheap grace is the grace we bestow on ourselves. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ living and incarnate. Costly grace is the kingly rule of Christ, for whose sake a man will pluck out the eye which causes him to stumble. It is the call of Jesus Christ, at which the disciple leaves his nets and follows him. Are we self-deceived about how much we love Jesus? When things go wrong in our circumstances, so many of us have hearts that are gripped with fear. We have no peace. We can only see the here and the now. The promise that he is with us, the promise that he has overcome is out the window. I've got this, and I can't deal with it. And yet the final piece of the passage seems to be so untrue. He says, I have said all these things to you, that in me you might have peace. I'm telling you you'll have tribulation, and I tell you that so you'll have peace. What? That doesn't make any sense. Those are opposites, aren't they? Well, what Jesus is saying is that peace has nothing to do with tribulation. It has nothing to do with pleasant circumstances. It really has nothing to do with our obedience even, or our lack of obedience. It has everything to do with actually believing what is true, that he's with us and that he has overcome the world. Peace is when we throw ourselves full-fledged into Christ and say, I'm staking my life on this. I'm staking my life on this. Take heart, I have overcome the world. I was looking at some of the Greek on this. There's one word for take heart. Tharsete. And it means to be of good cheer, to take courage, to not be afraid. But it's not a suggestion. It's in the imperative tense. And you know what the imperative is? When your mother is standing there doing this to you, right? What my mother did to me, telling me, you're going to mow that grass back in the woods. But it's the woods. You're going to go mow that grass in the woods. See, I'm still carrying it, and that's how many years now? I am. Do we have any therapists in here? Could we work it out right now? Imperative. Imperative. Do not be afraid. Cheer up. When the circumstances go awry, cheer up. Don't be afraid. Take courage. Why? Because I've overcome the world. How did he do that? He became a curse for us. It would only be a few short hours after he declares this to his disciples, that he would be brutally tortured, brutally murdered, unjustly, with the most terrible form of execution that the Romans could come up with, the cross. He wasn't forced to do this. We get a hint of that here, even in our passage in verse 28, where he says, I came from the Father. I came willingly. I wasn't forced to come. I wasn't pushed out. This is, my Father and I agreed to this, and I willingly came. I came from the Father. I did it willingly, full of love for you. See, he did it for a bunch of disciples who were absolutely clueless. And he did it for us. He paid the penalty for people who are addicted to their comfort, who are addicted to their affluence, who are addicted to propping up their own reputations, who are addicted to the rat race of life, thinking that the rat race will get them ahead. He did it for the self-deceived. Yes, he did it for us. For us. See, it's these addictions that have made us so anxious and, frankly, absolutely weary, because we're so busy protecting and maintaining all our stuff. And it's stuff that in the long run we were never going to keep anyway. So how do we get free? How do we get peace? I have two suggestions. The first one is we put our eyes on him That means to spend time in silence and in meditation and in reading His Word and in praying and in talking to others about Him. These are the ways that we learn to know Him better. See, we actually need to meditate on His sacrifice for us. We need to think about it. We need to think about the implications, actually have a plan where we are going to think about the implications of His sacrifice for us in our priorities. How does that affect the way we live our lives? How does that affect the way we spend our money? How does that affect the way we relate to one another? How does that affect the way we do our jobs? We need to meditate on these things. You can't get it from Sunday morning. It won't work. Because we forget. We need it every day. We've got to spend time with Him. We need to know of His love for us. We need to think about how He has overcome the world. We need to take heart. Cheer up. Stop fearing. Because He has overcome the world. But second, we need to work at being honest with ourselves about where our loves lie. What is it that we love? See, here is the crux of the issue. We've got to search. What is it that we truly love? Oh, we can give the answer everybody wants to hear. We can talk about it all over the place. But what is it that we love? See, because this is going to determine what we pursue and what our priorities are. And I think to answer that question is, what are the things that we fear? Because see, the things that we fear comes from because something we hold as supreme to our well-being is being threatened. That's where fear comes from. Something we think is something we can't live without. Something that is so important to us, and it's being threatened, and we're terrified by it. That's the thing we love. That's the thing that we love. So we need to repent. Fall on our faces before Jesus and say, Lord, I love that. I haven't loved you. I love that. I don't know how to change my heart. Come, change me, work in me. And then we need to take steps to change our loves. Your heart changes as you move out in faith and do these things, as you step out in faith and pursue Him and pursue Him and pursue Him, and pretty soon it begins to change. It's true. I've seen it in my own life. It really does work. I hate to say it works, so we do stuff that works. No, He comes. When we spend time, He comes. He comes to us. Because it's when Jesus is our supreme desire that we are free, which means we don't have to know everything. We don't have to be right all the time. We can admit that we might be self-deceived because we're looking to Him to show us the truth. We're not offended when someone says something hard to us. We're willing to forgive our enemies. We're willing to speak the truth in love to one another. We're willing to be witnesses for Jesus, even in hostile places, and so many more things. This is what Jesus begins to work in us. Brothers and sisters, if we're going to help one another follow Jesus, we're going to have to unseat the strong passions that keep us away from Jesus. And the only way to unseat that is with a deeper passion for the Lord Jesus. So here's the thing about the disciples as I close. They were scattered on that night, but after Jesus rose from the dead, they got it. They took to heart what He had told them. They actually believed that He had overcome the world. So much so that they spread throughout the known world and preached the gospel, and the church spread like wildfire. They took it to heart in very difficult circumstances. In fact, most of them died martyrs' deaths. Peter and Paul were both martyred at the hand of Nero in about 66 AD. Paul was beheaded. Peter was crucified, but he didn't want to be crucified right side up because he didn't think he was worthy to be crucified like Christ was. So he asked them to crucify him upside down. Andrew is reported to have been crucified while preaching in what is modern-day Russia. Thomas, the one who doubted that Jesus had risen from the dead, is said to have preached in India. And the claim is that he died there by being pierced with swords by 4 soldiers. Philip is said to have preached in North Africa, where he converted the wife of a Roman proconsul. And in retaliation, that proconsul had Philip arrested and cruelly put to death. And this is the story over and over and over of people who got it. And we look at it and we say, that's horrible. I don't want to die a martyr's death. But here's the thing. That's nothing compared to what's coming. If we believe that Jesus has overcome, our lives are worth nothing. They don't matter that much. What he is about is what matters. This is what matters. They took to heart what they knew, that Jesus had overcome the world. Will you? Will you? It's the gospel, and it changes everything. Let's pray.